Hi, I'm Dr. Jocelin Whitaker, and I'm excited to be back with you guys this year at Take on the World. And while there's nothing like seeing you in person and giving you actual real live hugs, I'm very thankful for technology that allows us to connect. Some of you may remember me from being there last year, and it's an honor to be back. Thank you, Chris and Liz, for all the hard work that you have put into this behind the scenes. For those of you that haven't had a chance to get to know me, I'm a doctor of traditional naturopathy. I have been working in the health world all of my life because herbs saved my life as a child. I'm up to 8 degrees and almost ready to complete my PhD in natural health. I have an active practice, and one of my favorite passions is to continue learning, studying, and sharing that research with my clients and in presentation settings. So today I'm going to be talking about the real truth about the dangers of stevia and xylitol. If you walk into a traditional health food store, you're going to find things like gum with xylitol in it. You're going to find snacks that are sweetened with stevia or xylitol. You're going to find drinks that have stevia in them. And you're going to be told this is a natural sweetener that is safe. But is it really? And we're going to dive into that question because as believers in Messiah, we know that He has given us every herb bearing product, every herb bearing plant for us to consume that is good for us. And He wants us to differentiate between those things that are good and those things that are bad or evil, just as we differentiate in our spiritual life between those things that are good and evil. So today we're going to talk about the real truth about stevia and xylitol. So first of all, in order to keep us on the same page, I want to talk about what is sugar. Sugar is the generic name for sweet tasting soluble carbohydrates, many of which are used in food. We find that sugar is derived from different sources such as fruit, white sugar, brown sugar, evaporated cane sugar, demerara, sucanat, maple syrup, honey, even things called fake sweeteners or artificial sweeteners, sugar alcohols. So there's all of these different names for sugar, even though it is actually a form of carbohydrate, which our body then converts into energy or into fat. So as sugar enters your bloodstream, it goes to your pancreas. Then insulin is released, your body's sugar regulator. Obviously, if you get too much sugar, you overload the pancreas and you put stress on it. And our American diet tends to be extremely high in sugar. Hence, we've kind of had this cultural move to sugar-free, sugar alternatives. But let's talk about the whole process of sugar. When we consume too much sugar at once, too much insulin has to be released in order to compensate for it, which then causes our blood sugar level to drop. At this point, our body calls out for more sugar, creating a craving, which then we often give it. And as a result of this whole process, the body begins to get used to having sugar. And if it doesn't have enough sugar, it gets really upset. So it stores this excess sugar when you have more in your fat cells for later use. And it starts to create long-term issues. Overconsumption of processed sugars can directly lead to things like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, kidney disease, and much more. So sugar is something we need to moderate how much we are actually eating. And while fruit sugars are not something we should be eating this overabundance of, they're actually a very nutrient dense, beneficial form of sugar versus refined sugars that are very processed. During the processing, refined sugar is stripped of its nutrients, leaving only the sweetness and calories. So ultimately, the trick to balancing sugar consumption is moderation. In the realm of sugar, less is really more. If you regulate your sugar consumption, your body begins to understand how to utilize it. Unless there is an underlying issue, your body will learn how to use the sugars you give it for energy rather than storing in fat cells. It's just like if you have a small piece of cake, you can enjoy the flavor, you can savor it, you can enjoy all of the different taste and the texture. But if you have a large piece of cake, oftentimes by the time you get to the end of it, you're just eating it because you're enjoying the process of eating, not necessarily enjoying the flavor. So make the things that you eat that are sweet about enjoying the taste and the flavor in smaller, more moderated portions. Now, we've all heard probably about MSG. It has multitudes of names. It's not good for us, but sugar and sweeteners go by multiple names themselves. And it can be very hard to recognize. If I tell you, watch how much sugar you're consuming, you're going to read ingredients on packages and say, oh, well, there's no sugar in here. But there is something called concentrated fruit juice. Maybe there's something called dextrose or sorbitol or sucanat or xylose or monoglycerides, and you don't realize that all of those are various forms of sugar. So this is a pretty complete, maybe not 100% complete list of all of the different names of sugars and sweeteners. Some of them you probably recognize very quickly, like glucose and high fructose corn syrup, corn sugar, corn syrup, date sugar, things that are easy to spot, but some of them aren't as easy to figure out are actually forms of sugar. So the real problem with sugar is a lack of control over our diet. The American diet is supersized. It is really does not have proper portion control. From a health perspective, a serving of meat is approximately 3 ounces. So that would be a chicken thigh, about a half of an average sized chicken breast, a small section of steak. It's about the size of a deck of cards. It's really not that huge of a portion of meat. A serving of a carbohydrate is a quarter cup. How many of us, when we sit down for dinner, we have a nice sized piece of meat and we take 2 spoonfuls of the starch that we're having and maybe a small spoonful of the vegetable, and don't even really think about the amount of sugar that you're getting from those starches and carbohydrates. Then you add in a dessert, and instead of having a small piece, technically a slice of wedding cake should be 2 inches by 2 inches. That's not a big piece. It's a pretty small cube that you would actually be eating. And then the height adds in. That's what is considered a serving of wedding cake. But when most of us slice a cake, it's much larger. So our lack of control over our diet, our portions, everything's supersized, mega sized, extra large, and then a lack of self-control. When we go to somebody's home or we go out to eat or we put portions on our plate, we have a choice. We don't have to eat everything that's set before us. We can control the portions and say, you know what, I'm going to save this other part for later. I can choose to have a half of a cookie or 1 cookie and not 4 cookies. So it really goes back to our lack of self-control in general. And I'm generalizing the overall American philosophy of diet. So the standard American diet is nicknamed in the natural health world as sad diet because it is very sad the way that we oversweeten, over portion size, and we don't take advantage of other flavors. One thing I encourage people is learn to eat more savory foods. In the Mediterranean countries, Israel, which we're all very familiar with as believers, they use a lot of savory flavors, and sweet is a very small treat. That was one thing when I went to Israel, I was very surprised about even their sweets were more towards the savory side. They used a lot of fruits, and there wasn't this whole array of sweets that you would find here in the US. So our response here has been, okay, since we're eating too much sugar and we don't have the self-control and we're not controlling our portion size and everybody's getting too much weight and we're having all these health issues, let's use alternative sweeteners. But is that really a good idea? Does that really fix the problem? I'm going to talk about aspartame first. And then I'm going to talk about Splenda and Sweet and Low, which most of you probably are already familiar with some of the different dangers of these, but I want to make sure we're on the same page. So these are traditional alternative sweeteners. Aspartame, which goes by the brand name of Equal, has a lot of negative research studies showing huge issues with its consumption. Aspartame potentially increases the risk of cancer. Overall, studies have discovered links between aspartame and the following cancers: liver cancer, lung cancer, brain cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and central nervous system cancers. Cancer incidence seems to increase when animals are exposed to aspartame in the womb, underlining the importance for pregnant mothers never to consume aspartame. It might also induce or worsen diabetes. Diet soda consumption is associated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, as well as metabolic syndrome, a cluster of symptoms indicative of heart disease. The consumption of aspartame could increase risk of heart disease and stroke. It could cause nervous system and brain disorders, including Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, depression, increase in brain cell death, possibly seizures, and more. It could worsen or trigger mood disorders. A famous study was conducted in 1993 to discover a correlation between mood disorders and aspartame in those with or without depression diagnoses. Before it could be completed, the Institutional Review Board had to halt the study because the participants who had a history of depression experienced such severe negative reactions that it led to the department to discourage anyone with a history of mood problems from ingesting aspartame because of their suggested high sensitivity to it. So when a study gets stopped in the mid-study, we're not talking minor side effects like upset stomachs, slightly worsening moods. We are talking major clinical crisis level effects from the consumption of this, to the point that they felt people's lives and health was at risk from consuming aspartame if they had a history of any kind of mood disorder or mental health issue or depression. Aspartame also possibly contributes to fibromyalgia, which we are seeing a huge increase in this diagnosis. Fibromyalgia is tied to exposure to glyphosate, leaky gut, and aspartame only seeks to worsen that. It's also associated with weight gain. Aspartame is tied to causing premature menstruation. Now, one of the reasons that this is super important is because the long-term risk of early puberty or developing your monthly cycle before the age of 13 include breast cancer, HPV, heart disease, diabetes, and overall mortality. So there's a lot of issues, and we are seeing young women who are starting their monthly cycles earlier and earlier, and they're linking some of this to the sweeteners and the foods that those children are being exposed to. Aspartame is also linked to autism. In the journal Medical Hypothesis, researchers discussed a study in which women who had been exposed to dietary methanol found in aspartame were significantly more likely to give birth to children who developed autism. There's an increased risk of kidney disease. In people with initially healthy kidney function, drinking diet sodas laden with aspartame may be associated with a 30% greater drop in kidney function than those who do not drink diet sodas. This research was conducted over 20 years and included over 3,000 women, which in the scope of clinical studies is an extremely long time and a very large sampling number. So it increases the accuracy of the information that's presented. Now, Splenda, the yellow packets that we all recognize. Its actual name is sucralose. And so we know that sucralose can affect gut bacteria. In fact, research has found that sucralose can reduce gut bacteria by as much as 50%. Interestingly enough, that reduction is preferentially targeting the bacteria known to have important human health benefits. This imbalance in the gut can cause blood sugar issues and increased risk of diabetes. So what that's saying is when it targets reducing the gut bacteria, In our gut or our intestines, we have bacteria, both good and bad. And the balance of the good to the bad is what keeps us healthy, reduces inflammation, prevents chronic disease. And so the more that you reduce your good gut bacteria by overconsumption of things like antibiotics, sucralose, it affects and reduces the good gut bacteria. So think of it as shutting off your defense system and then allowing your body to develop further issues. There was an increased risk of malignant tumors, especially leukemia in men, based on a recent mouse study. So most studies start at a mouse or rat laboratory level and are then transitioned into humans. Other recent research found sucralose causes definite changes in the liver of treated rats, suggesting toxic effects. According to the researchers, sucralose should be used with caution to avoid liver damage. The liver is one of our most important filtering organs. Think of the liver as though you took your car and you took out all your oil filters and you never changed the oil in the car. Pretty soon that engine would not be running smoothly. It would be completely clogged. It wouldn't be able to start and to transition from different speeds because that oil would just be full of all this gunk and everything. So we're doing the same types of things to our liver when we're exposed to toxins and not cleaning them out. Interestingly enough, absorption of Splenda goes into the fat cells of the body where it remains even after stopping usage of it. The chlorine molecules in sucralose or Splenda make it quite stable at room temperature, but when you heat it up, maybe cook with it, it forms chloropropanols, which are possible carcinogens or cancer-causing substances. The Center for Science and Public Interest changed its rating of Splenda from safe to caution and then back to avoid. Genetotoxicity or DNA damage and potentially adverse epigenetic effects are tied to Splenda. According to the paper on this research, the acceptable daily intake set for sucralose may be, in fact, hundreds of times too high to ensure safety. So what happens is the FDA steps in most things like Splenda or aspartame or sucralose, all these things, they step in and say, this is the maximum amount you should consume. So this study is saying, based on DNA damage and possible long-term genetic effects, that this level that has been set as the acceptable amount to consume may actually be hundreds of times too high to ensure safety to humans. Shrinkage of the thymus by up to 40% is tied to consumption of Splenda, enlargement of the liver and kidneys, calcification of the kidneys, increased leukocyte populations, which are your immune system cells in the thymus and lymph nodes, migraines. How many of us ladies have suffered from migraines at some point in our life? And interestingly enough, migraines are often triggered out of an imbalance of hormones or an overloaded liver, which we know from the different studies, Splenda and sucralose can highly affect the health of the liver. So Splenda can also alter glucose, insulin, and glucagon-like peptide levels and responses, which raises your risk for type 2 diabetes. A study published in the journal Diabetes Care confirmed that compared to controls, obese patients using sucralose experienced a greater incremental increase in peak plasma concentrations of glucose, a greater incremental increase in insulin and peak insulin secretion rate, along with a decrease in insulin clearance. That's not good for diabetics, so there's definitely a negative effect here. Alterations in peak glycoprotein levels, which could result in medications used in chemotherapy, AIDS treatments, and treatments for heart conditions being shunted back into the intestines rather than being absorbed by your body. So basically, that means that if you're taking sucralose or Splenda in via your diet, and you have to be on a medication for chemotherapy, AIDS treatment, or a heart condition, your body may not be absorbing all of that medication that your doctor thinks you're getting, which can have negative effects on the conditions that you're trying to treat. On to the pink packet, Sweet and Low. It is made in a laboratory through the oxidation of the chemicals. Oh, let's see if I can pronounce this one. Sulfonamide or phthalate anhydride. If we can't pronounce it pretty easily, it doesn't sound very edible to me. It looks like a white crystalline powder. Saccharin, which is the generic name for sweet and low, is commonly manufactured by combining anthracyclic acid, which is actually used as a corrosive agent for metal. They combine that with nitrous acid, sulfur dioxide, chlorine, and ammonia. That sounds like I'm manufacturing a chemical compound for something with metals or fabrication, but I'm actually manufacturing a fake sweetener called Sweet and Low using all of those delicious sounding ingredients. I don't know about you, but I certainly do not want those going in my body. In the 1970s, saccharin and other sulfur-based sweeteners were believed to possibly cause bladder cancer, and it was required to carry the following warning label. Use of this product may be hazardous to your health. This product contains saccharin, which has been determined to cause cancer in laboratory animals. The FDA went on to remove this warning, but many studies continue to link saccharin to serious health conditions. Sadly, it's the primary sweetener for children's medications, including chewable aspirin, cough syrup, and over-the-counter and prescription medications. It's believed that saccharin contributes to photosensitivity, nausea, digestive upset, tachycardia, and some types of cancer. As many of you are aware, the sugar industry and the alternative sweeteners industry has a lot of money to spend on advocacy at the government level to get things to be ruled as, quote, safe for consumption. Artificial sweeteners, including Sweet and Low, trick the body's ability to calculate and compensate for the calorie content of foods. This misperception of calories can lead to overindulgence of other sweet foods and sabotage dieting efforts. So basically, if your body gets used to fake sweeteners, you don't have the natural taste and the natural processing of sugars. So your body no longer learns to respond to sweet. If we're paying attention to when we eat, I don't know about you, but if I eat too much carbohydrates, I feel really sluggish. I don't have energy. And that's because I've learned to watch my diet. And if I sit down for breakfast, I have a overnight egg and a half of a bagel, I feel great. I've controlled the amount of carbohydrates I've had, and I've had some protein with it. Now, if I sat there and ate an entire bagel and one egg, I feel really sluggish. And that's just a normal complex carbohydrate made with whole grains. Then, same thing. I have dessert. If I have a cookie, that's a nice treat. My body enjoys it. I sit there and I have 3 cookies and I go, why in the world did I do something that silly? So if you pay attention to how your body responds, you actually learn self-control. But when you have artificial sweeteners, say you're drinking a Diet Coke, and you're like, oh, well, it's diet. It doesn't really matter. I'm not getting any sweet. Well, there's other things in there that is affecting your metabolism, your sugar, your carbohydrates, your weight. The consumption of diet sodas is actually tied to weight increase. So there's a lot of things that these fake sweeteners change the perception that our body has of what it's actually receiving to change the way that you eat versus going back to what God gave us, things like honey and maple syrup and the real foods that he gave us. So back to Sweet and Low. An often overlooked Sweet and Low danger is that it can cause allergic reactions. Saccharin is a sulfonamide compound which can cause allergic reactions in people that can't tolerate sulfa drugs. So since we've already ruled out Sweet and Low, Splenda, and Equal, what about natural sweeteners? People say, oh, well, it's natural, therefore it must be good for me. Well, poison ivy is natural, and most people, including myself, break out if we come in contact with poison ivy. So just because something is naturally occurring does not mean that it is good for us. There's a reason the Heavenly Father created these things, and they have a purpose. Just like He gave us pigs as a form of cleanup, but not for our consumption, there's the same question with fake sweeteners, even though they're called, quote, natural sweeteners. So this is the part you all have been waiting for. Let's talk about xylitol and stevia. So people who consume sweeteners habitually become desensitized to sweetness, so much so that unsweetened, healthy foods become unappetizing. This can lead to a less healthy diet, avoiding foods that provide satiety and instead filling up on empty, unhealthy calories from sweetened products. Think about children. They're a great example. If you let your child have a cookie in the morning, they're going to ask you for more cookies throughout the day because that cookie tasted really good. But if you tell them, no, you have to eat a good breakfast and you have to eat a good lunch, and then you can have a cookie as a snack, they learn that that is considered a treat and to enjoy the foods that are part of the meals. But here in America, we tend to oversweeten everything we consume. That's one thing about Mediterranean diets that I do like, that they incorporate a lot of savory flavors. And my family's not perfect. I still love my good old Southern home cooked foods, and I enjoy ice cream. It's about that whole moderation and learning to enjoy other flavors. And it's a process. I always say one successful baby step forward is better than 10 giant leapfrogs forward that ends up in 9 sliding, retracting steps. So take one baby step and say, okay, instead of having 2 cookies for dessert, today I'm only going to have 1. I'm going to see if I enjoy that one better as I start to moderate what I'm consuming. But let's talk about what you really wanted to hear: xylitol and stevia. So here's the cliff notes. Xylitol is a neurological toxin, digestive interrupter, adrenal issues are tied to it. Stevia, neurological toxin, elevates liver enzymes, reproductive hormone interrupter, creates adrenal issues, and more. But let's break it down. Those are very explosive statements for me to make, so I need to have some evidence that these issues are actually there. So about xylitol. Xylitol is a sugar alcohol, which is a low digestible carbohydrate that resists starch and includes fiber. Recently gaining ground in many health circles, and especially in the last 5 years, because of the claim that sugar alcohols are, quote, natural. Other varieties that fall within this sugar alcohol category that you've probably seen in stores includes erythritol, isomalt, lactol, mannitol, maltitol, sorbitol. Those are all forms of sugar alcohols. So a lot of what I have to say about xylitol is also going to apply to them. Considered a crystalline alcohol, xylitol is actually a derivative of xylose, a crystalline aldo sugar that is not digestible. Xylose, not xylitol, is naturally found in nature. It is mostly obtained from birch bark. Yet, like I said about poison ivy, just because something is natural doesn't mean it is good for you. Currently, most xylitol is produced by hydrogenating xylose, a chemical process that treats a compound with hydrogen, usually with a catalyst such as nickel. Now, wait a minute. I just used 2 words in that phrase that most people who've been around health concepts are going to red flag. Hydrogenating. One of the first things you learn when you get into natural health is hydrogenated oils are bad for you. You want to get away from your hydrogenated oils and get back to your healthier oils like your olive and coconut oils. So we're hydrogenating xylose to create xylitol, and then we're combining it with a catalyst such as nickel. That's a heavy metal. That's a toxin, in order to produce this natural sweetener. So xylitol is often mostly processed from corn, and often genetically modified. Genetically modified is where the gene of something has been modified with a portion from another gene. And within GMOs, they can use human DNA, animal DNA, virus DNA, bacterial DNA. There's a lot of different things that they can use in modifying the DNA. We've seen over the last 2 years the damage that genetic modification to genes of any kind can have. And to see this in our food chain, we can directly tie the genetically modified foods and the usage of glyphosate to a lot of health issues. So now we're talking about a sweetener that is coming from corn that has been genetically modified in most cases. As with all toxins, because the body can't digest them properly, precious metabolic resources are wasted in an attempt to clear it out of our digestive system and can thus cause unwanted weight gain. WebMD says about xylitol that there is not enough known about the use of xylitol during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Stay on the safe side and avoid usage. Sugar alcohol-based artificial sweeteners are a life-threatening toxin to dogs. There is concern that extremely high doses for long periods of time, more than 3 years, can cause tumors in humans. And because the body cannot digest sugar alcohols properly, the non-metabolized portion ferments and creates a favorable environment for harmful bacteria to colonize. This exacerbates yeast problems. Many people also experience constipation, gas, bloating, diarrhea, and the intestinal microflora use of the sweetener to create fatty acids as well as hydrogen and methane gas. So think about this. If you have sugar alcohol, such as xylitol, that you're consuming regularly, you're actually turning your intestines into a fermentation crock so that everything you digest, including your meats, is going to ferment. And fermented meat is disgusting. It smells rotten, and it grows a lot of things that it should not. One of the things that I see in my office is I will have people come in and they say, every time I eat meat, I feel sick to my stomach. I can't eat meat. Most of the time when you can't eat meat, you have a fermented gut. You have way too much overgrowth of fungus, and your body is no longer breaking down certain proteins and able to absorb different nutrients because of the way the gut is, and you're missing a lot of good bacteria that is your immune defense. And people who come in this condition, they are having a lot of allergies, environmental, food, they have low energy, there's typically blood sugar issues, adrenal issues, and so the more that this goes on, the more unhealthy and the less energy and mental clarity they personally have. Excess consumption of xylitol can cause excessive diarrhea. You can assume that chronic use of the same can have the same types of negative consequences that long-term laxative use would cause, namely nutrient deficiency, electrolyte imbalance, even constipation, as your bowel slowly loses its ability to contract properly. There's a lot of things that xylitol can cause issues with. It's also believed to be possible that xylitol builds up in the liver and can potentially have toxic consequences when used in large quantities. Over time, this can lead to metabolic disturbances. Metabolic disturbances are tied to multitudes of health issues, including diabetes, heart issues, memory issues, adrenal, thyroid, hormone, basically everything can be tied to a metabolic disturbance, according to a lot of research that is coming out in the last few years that is really trying to dig into why are we as Americans with access to so many different resources becoming some of the most unhealthy people. Ingesting sugar alcohols such as xylitol can limit the ability for nutrients such as fats and carbs to be metabolized adequately. Clinical trials have shown that consumption of sweeteners such as xylitol can lead to appetite dysregulation, resulting in a lack of satiety and ultimately the increase in fat consumption. Sugar alcohols as a group can interact with pharmaceutical drugs. Shane Ellison, I love his research. He's an organic chemist. And in an interview, he replied, I don't consider anything natural if it's processed with man-made chemicals. He said, xylitol will rip up your insides, namely the digestive tract. It's being touted as a natural product, most likely so that it can bypass regulation. Thus, very little studies exist on its side effects. Artificial sweeteners can trigger certain brain chemicals which can mimic drugs and cause addictions to sweets and even change our brain chemistry to be similar to a cocaine addict. I see this a lot. People who have overcome addictions of various kinds will often become addicted to sweet foods because the sugars in the food release similar chemicals as a drug addiction. So while they're no longer using the drugs, they're still getting a similar reaction that is allowing their body to feel that same way and to come off of the drugs and transfer the addiction to the food. This is very interesting. The leading supplier in the world of xylitol is a company called Dansico. Danisco actually happens to be a part of DuPont. DuPont, interestingly enough, was sued several years ago by the EPA for covering up for years the scientific evidence that PFOA, a substance in Teflon, is highly toxic, a carcinogen, and disrupts reproductive processes. We're talking millions of dollars of financial payouts that were placed because of the cover up that DuPont had in regards to the substance in Teflon. So when you have a company that is willing to cover up information, to not release 100% true information, what else are they covering up about xylitol or not allowing to be researched? It creates a lot of questions in my mind. And with this negative research that is coming out, and every year when I update my presentation, because I've actually been talking about the dangers of xylitol and stevia for about 8 years now. Every year I find more research. So when I first started talking about this 8 years ago, I was kind of the one off in the weeds, and people were like, oh, she's the doctor who doesn't like stevia and xylitol. And it's becoming more and more talked about. There's blog articles out there. There's people starting to research this and say that there are definite issues with the consumption of xylitol and stevia. And so as time goes on, we're seeing more and more concerning research about it. And who knows, maybe in 20 years, we're going to realize just how much damage that we have done. So to be on the cutting edge and to actually understand it now could potentially save you and your family issues that would develop as a side effect of consuming these, quote, natural sweeteners. From Natural Health 365, there is evidence mounting that connects these mysterious substances, sugar alcohols, to many disease conditions, including leaky gut, neurological damage, and cancer. In fact, even mainstream organizations are concluding that there is not enough information to confirm that the various sugar alcohols on the market are safe for pregnant and breastfeeding women, citing animal studies that show tumor growth resulting from regular high-dose consumption. These particles will eventually begin to rot, creating an environment ripe for bad bacteria and other pathogens to grow. The chemical materials in the gut will also affect the enterocyte cells that line the intestinal wall. With an increased amount of undigested sugar alcohols lying on its surface, the lining becomes weak, which affects the tight junctions that are the barrier between the digestive system and the circulatory system. This entire process leads to what is known as leaky gut. The primary health issue that studies show is connected to dozens of other diseases, including autoimmune diseases, thyroid disease, metabolic issues, neurological issues, and breast cancer. So I'll tell you a quick story about xylitol. When my husband Mark and I met, of course, we're getting to know each other. He's a little nervous. He's got his first girl, and he's chewing a lot of gum. It was a xylitol-based gum because his family didn't see any issue with it. And I noticed that he could have these large burps. Now, yes, guys can have burps, a little more masculine than us ladies in most cases. But it was to the point that I was like, wow, that's a lot. And I started noticing that it was always worse when he chewed the gum. So at that time, I didn't know anything about, these natural gums. There's a company out there called Glee Gum that we carry in our health food store, and they use cane sugar in their real gum. And I didn't know anything about it. So the only thing I knew was all the gums that I grew up with, like Juicy Fruit, and there was the red cinnamon one, and then there was the wintergreen one. All those now had aspartame in them. But Bubblicious, which has a bunch of other stuff in it, I don't recommend you go and buy Bubblicious. Please do not take this from this story, was the only one I knew that had real sugar. So I said, let's try an experiment. We were at a truck stop. My parents and I were at this one day. And I went down their candy aisle, and they had packs of Bubblicious that still had real sugar and no fake sweeteners in it. So I bought them a pack of it. I said, here, try chewing this when you're chewing gum for the next week. And within the first day, the large burps went away. Stopping to chew the gum saw an immediate change. And overall, I noticed that his digestive system began to improve. And he's like, wow, there really is a big difference in something as minor as getting that xylitol out of my diet. That was the only way he was consuming it. So that was one of the first times that I really saw my eyes open to very hands-on. And I started really studying what exactly is this stuff. It didn't set right in my spirit. And there was just some kind of barrier that I believe the Lord put there for a reason that allowed me to start researching this and say, okay, something doesn't set right with me, but why? And let me understand this so I can share it with other people. So artificial or natural, what is the healthiest artificial sweetener? Well, one that isn't artificial. Please don't be fooled into thinking that a 0-calorie artificial sweetener, even quote a natural sweetener with 0 grams of sugar, is healthy. Both human and animal studies are continuing to reveal that frequent consumption of diet soda or artificial sweeteners is associated with greater body mass index, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. Now, stevia is found in South and North America. It's, quote, an herb that is claimed to be about 300 times sweeter as compared with the typical sugar and is so applied in a range of food items. If you walk into most health food stores, you're going to find all kinds of things sweetened with stevia. But should we? Should we be consuming these items? The contents of stevia has 7 different main components: stevioside, rubicide A and C, glucoside A, rubicide B, D, and E. So sometimes if you're reading an ingredient label, it won't say stevia on it. It'll say stevioside or stevioglycosides. There's all different forms of it where it doesn't sound like it's just stevia. So you have to learn the multitude of names that stevia can go under. It's also found in a lot of your protein powders, your multivitamin juicing type powders. Anything powder based in the natural health world can often have stevia and or xylitol in it. So when I'm purchasing for our health food store, I'm reading labels and reading labels and reading labels until I almost go cross-eyed. And the interesting thing is some of the brands are actually coming out with stevia-free protein powders because there's starting to be so much pushback on the stevia. And there's a large enough percentage of people that are saying, I don't want stevia. I don't like the taste. I have concerns about its health, all of those different types of things that they're starting to take them out of products. Stevia is a diterpene, first isolated from the plant Stevia rubidia. Frequent additives to stevia as a sweetener include glycerin. It's often found in the liquid stevia extracts and can often come from soy, which is genetically modified unless it's certified organic. Natural flavors, which really means it could be anything. Xylitol is often combined with stevia. Truvia is one of those. It's half that stevia and xylitol. Dextrose can be added to stevia, and that's usually corn-based, which is another genetically modified product unless organic. Maltodextrin, usually derived from rice, potatoes, or corn, often sprayed with chemicals, and if corn-derived, often genetically modified. And it's not calorie-free either. It's just low enough that they can label it, quote, an alternative sweetener. So some companies use processes to create stevia blends that include chemical solvents, which includes one called acetaldehyde, which is toxic to the central nervous system, and a GMO corn derivative called erythritol. Oh, erythritol, we know that's not good for us. According to the FDA, the approved daily intake of stevia comes to 4 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Now, if you're like me, when we get to milligrams and kilograms, I'm like, okay, let's break this down. So to simplify it, if you weigh 100 pounds, that means you can have up to 180 milligrams per day, which equals 4.5 packets or 18 drops of stevia. If you weigh 150 pounds, that's up to 270 milligrams, 6.75 packets, or 27 drops. If you weigh 200 pounds, that's up to 360 milligrams a day, up to 9 packets a day, up to 36 drops. One packet is equal to 1 teaspoon in many cases. Sometimes it's equal to as little as a quarter teaspoon. It depends on the way that they're calculating the packets, but the person who was doing the math and the calculations when I did this packets was using a packet equaling a teaspoon. Interestingly enough, most people I know that use stevia, the first thing they do is they put stevia in their coffee as a sweetener. And they put anywhere from 1 to 3 droppers full of stevia in their coffee. A dropper full of stevia is 30 drops. So if you weigh an average of 150 pounds, we're going to use kind of middle of the road size person, and you put 30 drops of stevia in your morning coffee, and I'm going conservative, 1 dropper full, you've exceeded the ADI of stevia per the FDA by 3 drops. If you do 3 droppers full, which I know people who have done that, you have now gone 3 times over the FDA's approved daily intake amount of stevia. And as we go through this, we're going to see that in reality, this approved daily intake amount is an arbitrary number and is probably 10 to 100 times more than it should be. In fact, I'm going to advocate by the time we're done looking at all the research that none of us should be consuming stevia in our diet. According to the Mayo Clinic, the FDA hasn't approved whole leaf stevia or crude stevia extracts for use as food additives because of concerns about possible health effects. In particular, the FDA has concerns about the effects of whole leaf or crude stevia on blood sugar control, the kidneys, and the cardiovascular and reproductive systems. Stevia can interact with certain medications. So the risk of interaction between stevia and blood pressure conditions and medications, liver conditions and medications, kidney conditions and medications, heart conditions and medications, hormone regulating medications, steroids, cancer medications. There's a lot of interactions on that particular list. Stevia is said to be a significant obstruction in the body's metabolism process. Daily stevia consumption may stop or slow down metabolism and so interrupt with the conversion process of food into energy. Studies conducted by the Center for Science in the Public Interest indicates that large amounts of steviosides can interfere with the absorption of carbohydrates in animals and disrupt the conversion of food into energy within the cells. Scientists are particularly worried about this development, especially as it pertains to children. Consumption of stevia may be linked to cancer. After it has been tested inside the laboratory, it was discovered that the product has the capability to carry mutations in the genetic material or DNA of the cell. One study found 16% of infants with nasal allergies to be allergic to stevia, 34% of infants with bronchial asthma to be allergic to stevia, and 64% of infants with atopic eczema to be allergic to stevia. Allergic reactions to stevia, from difficulty swallowing to shortness of breath to dizziness. Also, people who are allergic to plants in the compositate or astraceae family, like chrysanthemums, marigolds, ragweed, or daisies, can be allergic to stevia. Stevia can contribute to weight gain rather than helping you lose weight, which is why most people will switch to trying to consume stevia. Think about it. Stevia is a substance 300 times sweeter than sugar. And like sugar or sweeteners, it is not going to help you get rid of your sweet tooth or your habit of eating sweets. It may potentially boost your appetite, and you will only crave for more sugar throughout the day. Gas, nausea, numbness, bloating, dizziness are among the side effects of stevia reported. Stevia is also considered a diuretic, meaning that it increases the speed at which the body expels water and electrolytes from the body in urine. The diuretic action of stevia inhibits the natural mechanism of lithium removal from the body, leading to the accumulation of lithium in the body, causing severe side effects. Various experiments were carried out in rodents based on this factor. The results indicated the occurrence of infertility in rodents due to lithium accumulation. Lithium is actually a very interesting mineral. Low lithium is tied to depression. High lithium is tied to infertility and mental issues. So there's a balance. We need just the right amount of it. So if you have something that is messing with your lithium levels, that is extremely dangerous for a lot of health reasons. So stevia as a sweetener is often made from the stevioglycosides found in the leaf, which you'll often find it listed as stevioglycosides on the label instead of stevia. So if you're reading labels and you're like, does this have stevia? Make sure you're looking for the different names. Stevia glycosides are not considered to be a natural ingredient due to its significant processing and the types of solvents used for its extraction and purification. Claims which create the impression that stevioglycoside itself is natural are not permitted. Therefore, stevioglycosides cannot be described as a natural sweetener. Not all, but a fair amount of the research listed in PubMed, which is the government-run website compiling many of the research studies that are done. If you look at the end of a given paper on stevia, for the conflicts or funding disclosures, you will notice that many of them are receiving money from sweetener manufacturers or someone who's related to someone who has a vested interest in promoting them. You sometimes have to follow the money path back a few people to see the various connections, but it's really no surprise that there's often a half full glass narrative in regards to these studies. There was a 2014 study out of the European country of Latvia suggesting that stevia may have a negative effect on probiotic bacteria. 6 different strains of Lactobacillus reuteri were tested in the lab. That's something naturally found in human gut flora. Just about every probiotic dietary supplement on the market contains strains from the genus Lactobacillus, some containing several different versions. Interestingly enough, both stevioside and rubicide A were found to inhibit the growth of all 6 strains tested. And we'll see later in a 2020 study that some of this information was recreated. Stevioside, a derivative of the stevia plant, also caused DNA breakage in blood, spleen, liver, and brain cells in rats, as well as increased liver weights. Steviol and rubicide A have been found to be mutagenic in laboratory in vitro testing. A daily dose of stevia purportedly has been used as an oral contraceptive by Paraguayan Mato Grosso Indian tribes. I still remember when I first heard about stevia, the original sourcing of it was a tribe that used it, the whole leaf, no refining, no extracting. They were chewing the whole leaf taken directly from the plant as a form of natural birth control, and it was being used extremely successfully, reducing their fertility rate. And that's where stevia was originated from. We later found out that that was the Paraguayan Mato Grosso Indian tribes that were using that. And now we have brought it as a sweetener to the United States and many first world countries. Problems or complexities in reproduction are also believed to be one of the dangers of stevia. Long-term regular stevia consumption is believed to impact the reproductive system of males, especially resulting to a reduced sperm count. When tried on female animals, it was discovered that the product resulted in reduced offspring number. Stevia continues to decrease fertility for at least 50 to 60 days after intake is stopped. One of the things that was very interesting to me was midwives in our area. As a naturopath, I often interact with midwives. And we would get on this topic of the stevia, and they would tell me that they consistently saw an increase in miscarriages in women who were consuming stevia as part of their diet with no other known lifestyle changes. When the women removed the stevia from their diet, their miscarriage rate went back down. That's very concerning. Chronic administration, 60 days of a stevia rubinata aqueous extract produced a decrease in final weight of testes, seminal vesicle, and cauda epididymitis. In addition, the fructose content of the accessory sex glands and the epididymal sperm concentration are decreased. Stevia treatment tended to decrease the plasma testosterone level, probably by a putative affinity of glycosides of extract for a certain androgen receptor, and no alteration occurred in luteinizing hormone level. This data is consistent with the possibility that stevia extracts may decrease the fertility of male rats. Another study found a 60% decrease in seminal vesicle weight in rats compared to a control group. So we're talking about various ways that stevia is reducing fertility in men and in women. Stevioglycosides are synthesized in the same pathway and end up being structurally very similar to the plant hormones ghrelin and taurine. This means that stevioglycosides have a hormone structure there is evidence that stevioglycosides have a contraceptive effect in both male and females. In particular, one specific stevioglycoside called stevioside has been shown to have potent contraceptive properties in female rats, implying that stevia may have an impact on estrogen, progesterone, or both. So, stevia is sweet on the palate. So when you taste it, it tastes sweet. The body assumes that it's receiving sugar and primes itself to do so. Glucose is cleared out of your bloodstream. Blood sugars drop, but no real sugar or glucose is provided to the body to compensate for what the body has done to be ready for more sugar. When this happens, adrenaline and cortisol hormones surge to mobilize sugar from other sources, liver, muscle glycogen, protein, or body tissue, to bring blood glucose levels back up so you don't end up in hypoglycemia. The frequent release of these stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, in response to stevia-induced hypoglycemia can be damaging to our adrenal glands and overall health. These stress hormones are designed to be utilized when we need them in a fight or flight response, not when we're eating a meal, and especially not at all 3 meals every single day. The consequences to increased cortisol, suppressed immune system, increased inflammation, increased abdominal fat, lower thyroid function, just to name a few. Anecdotal evidence refers to individuals experiencing numbness in their hands and feet and even on the tongue after taking stevia. Stevia is a sugar alcohol, and while it's not identical in structure as a grain alcohol, things like wine, beer, anything in the alcoholic family, it does have an effect on the liver, just like alcohol consumption does. Many people choose stevia over natural sweeteners like fruit and honey, thinking that they're making a healthier choice. But this is not a good choice. Fruit and raw honey in particular are excellently balanced sources of glucose and fructose, providing the liver with building blocks to create glycogen, glucose stores. Stevia, however, does not support glycogen formation. So glycogen, why is this so important? When blood sugar is low, glycogen is broken down and released as glucose in the bloodstream. When the diet lacks sufficient glucose, there will be inadequate glycogen stored. If sugar is not immediately ingested to raise blood sugar levels, the body releases extra adrenaline and cortisol to convert muscle protein and fat into glucose. If this pattern is repeated, the frequent release of these stress hormones takes a toll on the body, and one of the most manifest symptoms of excess cortisol is abdominal weight gain. Additionally, the body cannot convert inactive thyroid hormone T4 into active thyroid hormone T3 without adequate glycogen. The resulting hypothyroidism leads to a slow metabolism, which means there's a host of symptoms that comes along with it, such as weight gain, hair loss, lack of energy. And without adequate dietary sugars, the body cannot create and store glycogens. Obviously, chronic stevia consumption puts stress on the liver that results in elevation in ALT, AST, and altered bile output. Bruno Hernandez reported that stevia and its derivatives have elevated the percentage of liver fat. A prolonged consumption of stevia elevates A1C numbers in healthy individuals. A recent 2020 study showed significantly elevated levels of liver function enzymes, ALT and AST, urea, creatinine, cholesterol, LDL, and free fatty acids. Stevia also led to oxidative stress. In the study conclusion, non-calorie sweeteners, either artificial sucralose, aka Splenda, or natural, so they put Splenda and stevia up against each other along with sugar. So they were comparing these 3 sweeteners in this study. So they said, in conclusion, Splenda or stevia had several risk factors to their consumers. They are both, stevia and Splenda, responsible for increasing glycemia in spite of their lack of calories, increasing liver enzymes due to the intestinal flora reshaping, elevation of urea and creatinine levels, reduction of the anti-inflammatory cytokines, and elevation of the pro-inflammatory cytokine secretion. On the other hand, sucrose, or real sugar, is a caloric sweetener with some risk, of course, but it is safer than sucralose or stevia. So we recommend not using sucralose or stevia and decreasing the use daily dose of sucrose, real sugar, instead. So when studies are showing that real sugar is less dangerous than stevia, we have a major problem on our hands. We know that too much sugar can cause health issues, but it's the out of control consumption of sugar that creates these issues. But stevia is as dangerous as sucralose or Splenda. This is getting really scary, and we're calling it natural. I still remember 7.5 years ago when we first opened our health food store. I had a lady walk in our store, and this is right when I was first studying all of this about stevia and xylitol. And she came in and she said, "Do you have a supplement that would help me lower my liver enzymes?" And I said, "Yes, I'll be glad to direct you to him. But before I do so, may I ask you if you're consuming any stevia?" And she said, "Well, that's very interesting that you're asking me that question. You are the second person to ask me this." And I thought, who else is as crazy as me? Because this is something that a lot of people think I've kind of fallen off into left field, even though I really think there's enough information here to cause concern. She said, "My medical doctor who did my lab work asked me the question when he saw my elevated liver enzymes, 'Are you consuming stevia?' And he told me if I had been consuming stevia, he would have me stop consuming it for 3 weeks and then reorder the blood work to check my liver enzymes. And then, only then, if my enzymes were still elevated, would he actually prescribe a prescription to lower my liver enzymes." That told me that he had clinically seen multiple people with direct elevation of their liver enzymes as a result of consuming stevia. And I've had multiple people approach me and give testimony to that exact fact. So in summary, stevia is a neurological toxin, elevates liver enzymes, reproductive hormone interrupter, causes adrenal issues, and has a lot more questionable health issues tied to it. Xylitol is a neurological toxin, digestive interrupter, and causes adrenal issues. So they are on my definite do not consume list. So what is a person to do? If I can't use these artificial sweeteners and I can't use these natural sweeteners, how in the world am I going to live a healthy lifestyle? The most important thing is to learn balance and self-control. It goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning. One cookie for a treat 2 or 3 times a week. You don't have to have 3 cookies a day. You get hungry? Have a half of a banana. That's a serving. Have an apple. You're going to get a lot less sweet sugars that your body is going to have to handle by eating a fruit that has fiber with it, and your body knows what to do with it. There's vegetables. They make great snacks. In fact, we like to freeze dry. And so we found that freeze drying certain things that not necessarily eat fresh will get us to snack on them because it concentrates the flavor. So use sweeteners in moderation. Again, that moderation. You don't have to drench everything in sugar. You don't have to sweeten every food. Learn to like other flavors, spicy, savory, tangy. There's all of these other palate flavors that our mouth is designed to enjoy. And when you learn to enjoy other flavors and then you have something sweet, you'll actually enjoy it more so. Use a variety of sweeteners. It's just like if you work on an assembly line. If you work on an assembly line and your job is to put a tire on the chassis of the car, you learn how to do it extremely well. And you can be very quick. You can just roll after tire after tire after tire, put them on. But if I tell you, you have to complete 5 different jobs, you have to put the tire on and the muffler and 3 other things. It takes time because you have to switch between different tools and different supplies. So that's why these assembly lines are created, because each person does one specific job and it moves to the next person on the assembly line. So it makes each person more effective because they're using the same tools, the same motions, and they're repeating themselves. The body is the same way. If you only ever use maple syrup as a sweetener, your body says, okay, maple syrup. I break it down this way, and this way. Good, all done. Maple syrup again. Doop, 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 all done. Maple syrup, doop, 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 all done. But if I use maple syrup Okay, doop, 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 done. Honey. Oh, well, let's see. I have to pull that file. I break it down this way, and this way. Oh, now you gave me some cane sugar. I break it down this way, this way, this way. Oh, fruit. Let's pull that file now. This way, this way, this way. Your body breaks things down. If you're using a variety, it doesn't get tired of breaking it down and get into this very speedy, repetitive way of doing it. Same way as us humans on an assembly line. So variety is key. So what do I do? In our home and in our family, balance is key. And yes, birthdays, we enjoy cake and ice cream, but we don't have cake and ice cream every day. So balance is key. Enjoy it as a treat, but you don't have to have it every day. Use a variety of sweeteners. So in our house, we have organic evaporated cane sugar, organic brown sugar, maple syrup, honey, agave nectar in limited usage, molasses, and monk fruit primarily as an additive in certain like pre-made things that we might buy. I have not found anything concerning with monk fruit as of this time. And again, it's really about watching portions, watching what you eat and watching how much you eat. So I can enjoy a cookie, but I don't have to have 3. And I can go back for thirds on my vegetables if I'm still hungry. Let's talk about something positive. We've talked about a lot of the negatives of the artificial and natural sweeteners. So let's talk about something positive. If I'm going to consume maple syrup, did you know that it has numerous antioxidants? These get rid of things like free radicals that cause cellular damage in our bodies and help have wonderful benefits. Maple syrup has a lower score on the glycemic index than many other sweeteners. It may help fight inflammatory and neurodegenerative diseases. It may help protect against cancer. It helps protect skin health. It is an alternative to sugar for improved digestion. Supplies important vitamins and minerals. Healthier alternative to artificial sweeteners. May enhance antibiotic effects. And it contains calcium, iron, magnesium, phosphorus, sodium, potassium, zinc, vitamins such as thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, B6. Every winter, I love to see maple syrup being boiled down, whether it's from our supplier for the health food store. We get to go out and see their modern, industrialized way of doing it, where they're still tapping the trees, but they have more effective ways of piping it in, and then they put it in the evaporator and evaporate the water off, or going out to our local state park, Malabar, where they do an annual maple syrup festival, and they talk about the various ways that the Native Americans boiled it down, that the pioneers boiled it down, and then how we have modernized it, but we're still pulling it from the same sap. Real maple syrup comes from the maple tree. There's no other way to get maple syrup. Now, when you do buy maple syrup, if you buy it and you've never bought it before, read ingredients, because you want 100% pure maple syrup. They will add other sweeteners and say maple flavored syrup or maple syrup, but it doesn't say 100% pure. So you want to make sure it's 100% pure maple syrup with no other ingredients other than maple syrup. Honey. Oh, honey made by the bees. In fact, we hear honey referenced multiple times in the Bible. There's even a Solomon-based riddle that involves bees, honey, and I think it was a lion. Honey contains natural minerals and vitamins which help the metabolizing of undesirable cholesterol and fatty acids on the organs and tissues into the system, hence preventing obesity and promoting better health for us. The vitamins present in honey are B6, thiamine, niacin, riboflavin, pantothenic acid, and certain amino acids. The minerals found in honey include calcium, copper, iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, and zinc. One of the most encouraging honey nutrition facts: this natural sweetener is rich in phenolic acids and flavonoids, which are a source of natural antioxidants. Honey has a healthy glycemic index, meaning that its sugars can be gradually absorbed into the bloodstream to result in better digestion. And in fact, it may even lower bad LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, and inflammation while raising good HDL cholesterol. Interestingly enough, honey has very strong healing properties for skin wounds. So if you cut yourself or you have an injury of any kind, putting honey, pure raw honey, on that wound is very, very healing. One of my regulars, it works in a burn wound care unit in a local hospital. And I said to her, I said, what do you guys use in the hospital? She said, we use medical grade honey, which has been pasteurized. That's why it's considered medical grade. We use medical grade honey and silver for all of our wound patients. And we use the hyperbaric chamber. That's what they use in a medical setting for healing wounds. And I was sitting there going, we carry all of that in our health food store. We carry Sovereign Silver, which is a form of colloidal silver, and we carry honey, and I use it. And in fact, my husband, we live on a farm, an organic farm where we raise beef and chicken and eggs. And he was injured putting in fence post, and he had a large gash on the top of his head. And I'm talking, a gash probably this large, if you can see how big I'm spreading my fingers apart. And I got a phone call. I was on my way home from the store. He'd been home working on the farm. And thankfully, my parents were also home. And my mom was on the phone. And she goes, Jocelyn, where are you? I said, I'm on my way home. Is something wrong? And they said, Mark's been injured. He's okay. He's alert. He's talking. But he got hit with a fence post driver. And he took it directly to the top of his head here. And they said, Mark, she's 15 minutes out. Do you think you can wait for her to get here? And my husband said, I think I can wait for her to get here before we have to go to the hospital. Now, any of you who know my husband, for him to say go to the hospital, there is a major emergency crisis. He does not say that. I have never heard my husband say that. So I'm going, oh my word, how injured is he? What is going on? So over the phone, I tell my mom and dad, place one of the large wound pads that we have, because I'm very big into having first aid care for your family at home. And I actually teach a class on off-grid natural health things that you would want to have on your home. And so I told him, put this pad on there, put pressure, start applying the Olive Tov Body Stop and Seal to stop the wound from bleeding, and I will be there. And I drove as fast as the speed limit the whole way home. I literally just got out of the car and I flew into the house. And my husband joked later, he's like, you flew in on with your doctor hat on. There was no wife there. There was the natural doctor just ready to see what was going on and what we needed to do. And I'm fully expecting that we're going to be turning around, running back out to the car, headed to the ER. But the wound had started to clot, and the bleeding was slowing, just doing the pressure and the stop and seal. So then I gently cleaned it, which restarted the bleeding, because we had to get all of the dirt and everything out of the wound because we didn't need any infection. And then my poor husband got a honey bath. He had this whole slathering of honey on a 2x2, 3x3 on top of his head. He looked like he had his own little kippah on his head out of bandages. And there was this honey. Left it there, and the neck changed it that night, and it had oozed blood, but it was clean. You could tell from the type of fluids that there was no infection forming, that it was clean, normal wound oozing as the body began to heal itself. The next morning, so I changed it that night, more honey. The next morning, another pad with honey. And this large gaping wound closed up. No stitches, no staples, no, rushing to the ER, and it just naturally closed up. No infection. The honey was so protective and beneficial. In fact, I'm never without honey in our house. So not only are there nutritional benefits, there's benefits to our skin, to our body. Manuka honey, there are studies showing that Manuka honey can prevent things even as severe as staph infections, and can heal all kinds of severe skin abrasions, wounds, scarring, all kinds of different things. So honey has huge, huge potential benefits. Evaporated cane sugar. So evaporated cane sugar is what is the natural sugar. So if you go in the big box store and you buy white sugar, just regular white sugar, it can come from either cane or beets. And most of the time, the sugar beets are genetically modified. So we don't want things from beets. We don't want beet sugar. Now, cane sugar But if they're making white sugar from cane, they still take it, they remove the molasses. That's how you get molasses. It comes off of the cane sugar and it's separated out. If they leave a portion of it and only dry it, you get brown sugar. But if you remove the molasses and you have the regular cane sugar, at that point it's considered evaporated cane sugar. But then what they do is they put it through a chemical bleaching process and they finally grind it to create granulated or table sugar. No, you don't want them to go that far. So you want to back up a step. You want to remove the bleaching and all the heavy processing. You want it to be certified organic, and you want it to be called organic evaporated cane sugar. It's a completely natural sweetener. It's made from the sugar cane. It's not processed as much as table sugar, and so it has more nutrients left in it. It can be used straight 1-to-1. So if I'm making cookies and my recipe calls for 1 cup of sugar, and I know it's grandma's recipe and she used regular granulated sugar, I just use 1 cup of evaporated cane sugar and there's no consistency issues. Organic evaporated cane sugar was the form of sugar used throughout most of civilization's history. The crystals that form when sugar cane juice is left to evaporate. However, most sugar sold in the supermarket has undergone extensive processing. Processed sugar has been linked to many health conditions, including diabetes and heart disease. Evaporated cane juice is not refined, retaining many of the nutrients from the cane as well as its natural tan color. It also retains some of its minerals, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, iron, and potassium content. So we also use, molasses and organic powdered sugar for a rare treat. But the main things I prefer to use are the honey, maple syrup, and evaporated cane sugar. If you have enjoyed this presentation and want to continue reviewing this and would like to actually see footnotes to everything that I referenced, my book, The Real Truth About the Dangers of Stevia and Xylitol, its working title, is available for pre-order on our website, Whitaker's Natural Market. We tried to make the link really nice and easy for you. So all you have to do is type in whitakersnaturalmarket.com/Stevia book, and it will take you to the pre-order link. It's in proofreading right now, and we expect for it to be printed and available to ship starting at the beginning of the year. So it's a great way if you want to read some more, if you want to read all my footnotes and references, and I add some extra stories in there, kind of sharing some of the background of how I got started in studying this. And if you'd like to be able to share it with your friends and you're going, okay, I want all my friends to read this. I'm really learning about this and I want them to understand it. I hope that you find the book to be beneficial. So please, if you are interested in the book, go to our website and pre-order it, and you'll be first in line to get a copy as soon as it's published. I also offer the capability to work with you. One of the things that I love is to help people improve their health in all areas of life. And I work with people all across the country. So you don't have to be in Ohio, where I'm from. You can be anywhere in the United States. I work with people in Canada. I have people in other countries where we have to get creative in how we ship to them and communicate. But the Lord works in multitudes of ways to get the message of going back to his natural ways that he has created for our health. So if you would like to reach out to me and communicate with me, my practice is located at our health food store, Whitaker's Natural Market in Bellville, Ohio, just southeast of Mansfield. We're halfway between Columbus and Cleveland. So for most people, we're not too far of a drive. If you're not in the area, please check out our website, whitakersnaturalmarket.com, and specific to my practice, drjocelynwhitaker.com. You can also email me at that email above. So I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. And thank you so much for having me on to be part of Take on the World again this year. It's been an honor to be here.